So we're going to walk through first why you would do a visual brainstorming, talk through a few platforms, and then dive a little bit deeper into one of those platforms and conclude with a few tips. Okay, so next slide, we'll begin with why visual brainstorming in the first place? What are the benefits to visual brainstorming and why would you do it? It's often used with sticky notes or drawings to visually represent ideas. And this means that it allows different people and different learning styles to be able to engage and process and understand the information in an easier way. So it engages different types of learners or processing. It also allows for organization and connections that might not be as readily apparent as when information is simply in a list of notes. When you are visual brainstorming, you can create groupings, you can create different structures, and using various templates, you can begin to prioritize ideas or work through different scenarios that you might want to examine. And then finally, visual brainstorming can be a great exercise in teamwork and developing critical connections among participants, as communication, coordination, and group problem solving, depending on how the exercises are implemented and the ways in which the ideas are generated. For example, each member of a group might be asked to contribute one piece of a brainstorming activity and given slightly different prompts. Or the team could be tasked with representing something as a team, perhaps as a drawing or a visual representation of a space, and they need to coordinate where items are placed or where things go. Next slide. And then we wanted to break down a little bit a few platforms that allow for virtual visual brainstorming. Visual brainstorming usually uses this concept of the sticky notes or the drawings, as I said, but these platforms also allow for this virtual option. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and they're in no particular order. There are just a few of the options available to switch visual brainstorming to a virtual situation or virtual environment. The first is Trello, and it's a free platform that uses a card sorting principle to create groups for ideas and display visual cards. Many people might be familiar with it for project tracking or for personal to-dos, but it can be used as a brainstorming tool to virtually display groups of ideas or work through groupings in real time. The next one is Google Docs, and it's free with any Gmail account. Many people might be also familiar with this platform as well and use it for other project purposes, but it can be adapted to use for visual brainstorming or to jot down ideas during a virtual meeting so that everyone can access them and view them. There may be some limitations in terms of the graphics that can be incorporated or the templates, but it does have the advantage that people are very familiar with it, and therefore the instructions or the lead time in terms of the familiarity or getting used to a platform wouldn't be as necessary. The next one is the Post-it app. The Post-it app is a free application that can be downloaded to any Android or Apple device, and it's a virtual platform that uses Post-its, sticky notes, and you can organize them into boards. You can also take photos of perhaps real life sticky notes that you might have written to yourself, or perhaps you started a visual brainstorming activity in the office in person, and maybe you collected those notes from that visual brainstorming activity and you'd like to merge everything to a virtual platform. Using the Post-it app, you can take photos of those existing sticky notes. The next one is Mural. Mural is an online platform that allows for participatory visual brainstorming using sticky notes and various templates. So there's various different pricing options, but it also includes a free educational plan for those with an EDU email address and various ways to access the platform. The templates are quite extensive, so you can begin to prioritize, work through scenarios. You can do things like empathy mapping or journey mapping if you think that that would be appropriate for your project objectives. And the last one listed here is Mural. Mural uses various tools such as sticky notes, smart drawings, different widget functionalities, so free drawing and things like that, as well as templates to engage participants in visual brainstorming, product design, and product management. And there's a free option using the platform as well as paid upgraded plans. Next slide. And now we wanted to just dive a little bit deeper into visual brainstorming using Mural. Mural allows you to create, as I said, this using sticky notes and templates, multiple murals or whiteboards for brainstorming. So it mimics that flip chart paper that you would have in person. So these can be blank, or you can use one of the templates that are available. As I said, they include prioritization, assumptions, working through scenarios, doing maps. They allow for multiple people to participate simultaneously, and therefore all participants can be engaged in real time on a virtual platform such as Zoom using a screen share option. Participants would be given the link to the mural ahead of time and be able to access it during the virtual activity and add their input in real time. The platform is very easy to navigate, and I mentioned contained numerous options to structure your murals, add information, move things around, group things around, and it offers different workspaces, and within each workspace, different rooms to further structure your work or work on multiple projects together. So the pros is that there is a virtual voting option for idea prioritization. So perhaps you need to get to the several ideas that you want to get started with and move forward and start making decisions. You can do that very easily with Mural in terms of a voting option, and it allows participants to vote on specific sticky notes, specific ideas to move forward. There are also various integrations with other platforms, including Slack, OneDrive, Microsoft Teams, that can be beneficial. But there are some challenges to using Mural. It's a fairly new platform, so there is a learning curve to adding sticky notes, adding content, moving stickies around, or adapting templates for your needs. In addition, exporting into other formats isn't as easy as other platforms, so perhaps you wanted to send out a PDF or another file with meeting notes or things like that. So those are just some challenges to keep in mind to using the platform. Next slide. And finally, I wanted to end with some tips on hosting a virtual brainstorming activity, regardless of the platform that you choose to use. These are applicable across platforms. So the first one is to think about the objectives first. And this was mentioned in the beginning of the webinar in terms of considerations for going virtual, and in the subsequent presentations on peer assist and knowledge cafes. Visual brainstorming activities should always start with the questions, what is the objective and what do we hope to achieve? There are different forms of brainstorming, and asking these questions will help guide the direction of the visual brainstorming activity and determine the prompts that participants are given, as well as logistics, such as what platform perhaps that you do choose to use, or what template is appropriate within the platform that you have chosen. The second tip is to use small groups. It's recommended if using visual brainstorming during a virtual event live, as in participants would be adding things in real time on a virtual meeting, workshop, to keep the group relatively small. Or anticipate breaking into smaller groups for visual brainstorming activities. This could be done using the Zoom function that Anne mentioned for knowledge cafes. So the breakout rooms on Zoom can be applied for a visual brainstorming activity as well, and having smaller groups walk through a visual brainstorming activity. The next tip is to send out links ahead of your meeting to allow participants enough time to familiarize themselves with the platform. As I said, some of these platforms are very new, and therefore there may be a learning curve in terms of adding content, moving content around, or using the templates that do come with some of the platforms. But you should also be prepared to repeat the instructions during the activity, and this leads to the next tip. If the platform is new for participants, you need to anticipate building in extra time during the activity, or even before you break into smaller groups, if you have a larger group, to review the instructions of the activity, especially if visual brainstorming in general is new for participants. And that includes instructions for general visual brainstorming principles. So these are three sort of principles that visual brainstorming uses to keep ideas more organized and succinct. This includes only using one sticky note or card per idea, or visual drawing per idea, keeping them as short as possible, so only 3 lines per sticky note and card. And these instructions allow participants to more easily read ideas or more easily see drawings. Perhaps, you know, the idea is to quickly sketch something. When you are only representing one idea, you can more easily see those ideas if you keep it to 1 per drawing or 1 per sticky note. And you can move ideas around more easily. So you can create groupings, you can move them along templates. In terms of prioritizing, you can move ideas, you know, and prioritize more easily if you have 1 per sticky note or per drawing. And then lastly, the last tip is to think about different ways to engage. And this was also mentioned before, but the different steps of visual brainstorming can be done before or during a virtual meeting. So for example, one option is to send out a visual brainstorming board through whatever platform you choose ahead of time and ask participants to add their thoughts, and then use a virtual meeting to prioritize or group thoughts together. Or all of the visual brainstorming can be done ahead of time and presented during the virtual meeting, and really using that virtual meeting space to present the visual brainstorming activity that participants were tasked with before the meeting started. So next slide. And so lastly, I just wanted to mention a few different spots to learn more if you're interested in learning more about virtual brainstorming and visual brainstorming in general, as well as the platforms that were mentioned using these links on the slide. So thank you, everyone. I'll now hand it back over to